a great leader is not the one who is coming up with the best ideas or doing all the great work. They are really focused on creating the environment or the climate, the workplace that's set up in a way where their people can actually come and do their best work and contribute their great ideas.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a fantastic one. Our guest is a leadership coach at Mintify and a talent development strategist who has an extensive experience managing leadership programs, developing and executing enterprise-wide talent management strategies, and providing one-on-one coaching. She's also an upcoming speaker at QuickBooks Connect San Jose. Abbey, Louie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I'm excited to get into this conversation and help our listeners improve how they're working and their businesses and developing their own leadership. So before we get into all of that, Abbey, please tell us a little bit about you, your career journey leading up to this point.
Sure, you bet. I'd love to. I actually... your listeners will like this. I actually started my career in finance. So I studied finance in school and still have a love for numbers, a love for a good spreadsheet. And I started my career at the Boeing company in a finance leadership development program. Spent a couple of years rotating around to different finance groups there. And during that time, as much as I did really enjoy my finance experience, I really just recognized this passion in me to focus on employee development and leadership development. And so I navigated over to the global talent pipeline team at the Boeing company. And I spent about 13 years in total there managing leadership development programs and managing some of our broader talent development strategies, many of them specifically focused on how we were recruiting and hiring talent. So this topic that we're focused on today is near and dear to my heart. After those 13 years at the Boeing company, I actually moved locations. So I lived in Seattle and now I live in beautiful Boise, Idaho. For anybody out there who's been to Boise, it's fabulous. But I commuted for a number of years and then decided I was ready to reduce the commute, and I opened my own practice. So for the last couple of years, I have owned my own business consulting practice focused on very similar work to what I was doing at Boeing, a lot of leadership development, one-on-one coaching and training, and some broader consulting to help organizations really build capable, committed talent, help them align and connect and develop their people. And so I'm really passionate about that. In addition to my work through Mintify, I also co-founded a training for women. It's called Next Level Women Leaders. And we focus on training women to really grow their influence and their leadership by grounding themselves in their own inner confidence and then using that grounding to show up in a way that feels more authentic and is really more influential in the end. So that's a little bit about my background.
Wow. And you've got such an extensive background in leadership and different roles that you've had. I'm really curious, when we're talking about leaders, what does it take for our listener to be a great leader for their staff?
Yes, that's a great question. And it's something quite different than what it takes to be a great bookkeeper or accountant, right? That, I see this so often in my clients, the transition from an individual contributor to the manager role is a really hard transition to make. And especially hard, I would imagine that many of your listeners play a dual role when they have staff members. They're probably both managing those individuals and still doing some or a lot of the work as well. And so that dual role can be really hard. But to go back to your question of, well, if I do want to lead well, what does it look like to actually be a great leader of my staff members? I would say in a nutshell, a great leader is not the one who is coming up with the best ideas or doing all the great work. They are really focused on creating the environment or the climate, the workplace that's set up in a way where their people can actually come and do their best work and contribute their great ideas. It's a tricky switch to flip there, right? And I would say it can kind of be summed up in three things. When you're creating that environment where people can show up and do their best work, there are three things that you need to be providing. One, purpose and meaning in their work. So people need to know, where are we going? Why? And what's my role? And is the work that I'm doing important? What's the impact of my work? How is it connecting to the bigger picture? A great leader is also building connection. And so if your employees don't feel like you truly care for them, that they're valued, that they belong, that they can trust you and their teammates, that lack of connection is absolutely going to impact performance. And so the manager's job is to focus on building that connection. And then lastly, I would say that today's workforce also really wants development. A great leader is focused on continuing to grow and develop their employees so that they know that there's a future for them there and that they'll be able to continue to grow and develop. And, I just talking about this, it makes me think about really the best manager that I ever had. And that was at Boeing. His name was James. And when I think about what he did, it was absolutely purpose. I felt very purposeful and valued on the team, connected to him and the team. He was constantly developing me and stretching me. And when I think about what that drove in my performance, I gave my very best work and sweat and tears there, right? I worked some crazy hours, but it felt so worth it working for him. So when we show up in great leadership, there's a huge benefit from it as well.
Absolutely. And great story, and a wonderful way to reflect on, if you just think of, where have I enjoyed or who have I enjoyed being led by, and start to think about some of those qualities and take that into your own life. That's one. Question comes up though for me is, what if we're not good at leadership and it seems like, am I ever going to be able to be good at this and be able to be the type of person, like you say, with the manager or leader that you had, you could look at that and say, well, I'm not that, right? How do you become like that when maybe you're not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the good news is that great leadership and great management is developed and fostered. It's not necessarily something that people are born with. Yes, some people feel more naturally inclined to lead, but really, I believe anybody can develop those leadership and management skills, but it does take time and effort and learning what it looks like to be able to do that. And that's really a lot of the work that I do, both through training and coaching. It can be developed, but there's not a short answer to how to do that.
No,
right
for
now.
Sure. But you led to maybe a step, which is coaching. And I think that that's something to be discussed and considered, right? Is that if our listener right now is a small business owner sitting there and going, I don't need, they may not even know exactly what they're doing well, what they're not doing well. A coach like yourself is a great person that can maybe give some of that feedback and help them identify where they're strong, where they may need to work on some things, and get that different approach. Because like you said, it's developed, and that's the key word that you said. And I agree with you. It's, you can develop into anything, but you've got to be committed to developing into something, a better leader. And then you need help and guidance to perhaps streamline your pathway there, right? Shorten the pathway to actually get to that ideal leader that you want to be. What does it look like to get coached around leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that you can even start with self-coaching, to be honest. And something you said actually sparked that. So, first of all, if we're going to get coached, we need to know what is it we need to work on, and what should I even be, what behaviors should I be striving toward. And so the first step that I typically take with my coachees, and again, something that listeners can do on their own, is to gather feedback through an informal 360 review. And the process that I use, that I would recommend that others use, is you ask those below you, above you, side by side with you, those around you, two very simple questions. You ask, what am I currently doing well that you want me to do even more of? And second one, what could I be doing even better for you as a leader? And you get responses there. And then, and when I do this with my clients, I gather that feedback anonymously. But from there, then the leader reviews that information and typically patterns emerge, and they can narrow in on 1 to 3 key goals, key behaviors that they want to work on that would help them show up in their leadership even more effectively. And then the process from there is really, it's somewhat of a slow and very intentional process to start to discover, well, what does it look like to make that shift? And what can I try? And how can I engage my employees in this, sharing, this is something that I want to work on. What ideas do you have for me? And can you help give me feedback along the way? And really making it this collaborative process is critical. And again, you can start that process on your own, even without a coach. Although I will say working with a coach is very helpful for stepping up the level of commitment and accountability and just feeling that sense of support.
Yeah, agreed. And so also, I think it's important to mention some of the benefits that come with being a leader that's committed to being a better leader. And if you're already a great leader, great. But some of the benefits, you worked for, let's use the example of the person that you worked with at Boeing. Great leader. Mm-hmm. What did that leader, I forget his name, you mentioned it. James.
Yep, James.
What was in it for James to be a great leader? What did he get back from his team that other leaders may not have gotten back?
Yeah, I mean, you get the best performance and engagement from your team when you are leading well. Absolutely. I mean, there's this saying that says people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. And so those managers who aren't leading well are going to see turnover. They're going to lose talent. And those managers who are leading well are going to get more out of their employees than even thought possible. You know, you mentioned a practice earlier that is actually the exact way I start my leadership development programs, where I ask participants to think of the best boss that they ever had. And then I ask them to reflect on what percentage of your capability did you give to that manager? And then I ask them to reflect on what did that manager do to get the best from you, and how did they make you feel? And so those 3 questions, first of all, typically people say, I gave over 100% because I actually performed at levels even higher than I thought were possible with this manager's belief in me and with the way they motivated me. And then we really dive in to, and then what did the manager do specifically to get the best from you? And how did they make you feel? Because feelings drive all of our actions. And so that really goes back to creating that work environment where people feel safe and valued and like they belong and trusted, and it drives performance. And so that's a long answer to your question, but the benefit is huge. If you want to maximize team performance, individual employee performance, then great management and great leadership is crucial to being able to do that.
Yeah, and it's such a long-term play that often people forget. Right? It's like if you drank a soda pop, right? You're going to taste the sugar right away, and you're going to have this quick return on investment, right? It's like you get this sugar high. Whereas, if you're drinking water, right, you don't get any kind of response other than maybe you feel a little bit better. But what's that soda pop do? And if you did that every day versus drinking a glass of water every day, there would be a long-term effect that would occur. And so it's one of these things that it's like, okay, well, that's important to be a better leader, but it maybe isn't so urgent. But if we focus on it and do these things that you've been mentioning, which I think are really great examples of how someone can start to think about this, the long-term impact to your life, to your business is unmeasurable. Because when you say it, you actually get the best out of people. And what does that look like in a business where many of our listeners have small businesses? If you have 1 or 2 staff and they're giving you their best, they're giving you like 80%. I don't know if everybody gives 100% all the time, but if they're giving you 80 versus 50, that adds up big time in terms of them being able to give you what you essentially want in your business, which is a business that is growing and building and doing the things on its own versus you have to be doing everything.
Absolutely right. There's a multiplier effect for what your team can do under great leadership. And I love your analogy too of the soda pop. I'll use that one with my kids.
There you go. And so with that, there's also this concept I'd like to understand when people are building a team. What are some of the mistakes perhaps people make when they go out to hire people to be on their team? So is there certain types of people that's, if a leader's a certain type of leader, should they be thinking about certain types of people that they should be hiring?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. I heard a stat once, and I've heard several stats on it, and they all vary. But I heard a stat that one bad hire can cost 2.5 times the employee's salary to replace. So once you add up the cost of hiring the person, onboarding, having them work, then the cost of letting them go and needing to hire another and bring them on board, it's a significant expense. And so critical to be strategic and thoughtful in the way we are hiring our talent. So a great question. And some mistakes that I see employers making when trying to hire staff. And honestly, some mistakes that I even made myself when helping to lead strategy around this at Boeing. One thing I would say is that we often hire for the wrong things. We often are so focused on technical ability, their knowledge and their skills and expertise around the work that they'll be doing, which, let me pause and say, of course, is absolutely important that they do have the technical expertise to support the role. However, those skills can also continue to develop those once they're in the role. What's harder to develop is the character and the culture fit, right? And so if we have a certain cultural expectation or a certain desire for the way that we're behaving in the organization, but we fail to evaluate those elements in the candidate, it's going to be much harder to develop those in them once they're on board. And there will be a pretty negative impact on the team if we hire somebody who's not the right fit there. So first thing would be kind of hiring for the wrong things, not focusing enough on culture fit and character. The second piece I would say is a shallow hiring process. And so I can remember there were times at Boeing where we were conducting one-hour interview with a candidate and making a hiring decision thereafter. And in some instances, that's okay. But in many instances, especially for a small business, I would say take much more time to run and manage an in-depth hiring process. Anybody can put on a pretty good act for a 1-hour interview, right? And so how do we make that process a little bit more in-depth? And we can talk more about that too in a moment. But the third mistake that I would bring up is that sometimes we are unaware of how much our own biases are influencing the hiring process. There are quite a few different types of kind of implicit or unconscious bias that are at play in our hiring decisions, and we're not even aware that it's happening. And so being aware of those and addressing those is a really important part of managing an effective hiring process in order to hire the right talent.
Beautiful. I love those three. And it would be great to talk about a few things that they can do. And you've mentioned a few already, but a few things that you can do to avoid making those mistakes. Like you had mentioned, making the process a little bit more built out and elaborate.
Sure. You don't want to just stop with leaving them with the bad news mistakes and end there.
Well, that's always, we could always, it's great to have as a cliffhanger if we're going to do another episode. That'd be good.
No, I'm teasing, of course. Yeah, let's talk it through. Practically, what can you do to address these common mistakes?
Well, we should do though, Abby, is we should say, you know what, to get the answers to this, they have to come to QuickBooks Connect San Jose. Right. Come meet the both of us at our talks there and we'll give them all the answers plus, right? Wouldn't that be good?
That's a great idea. We will enlighten you there. We look forward to shaking your hand and meeting you in person, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you didn't get the point, everyone, we want to see you at QuickBooks Connect in San Jose because both Abbey and myself are speaking there, and we'll talk a little bit more of that at the end of the episode. But anyways, I keep cutting you off, Abbey. Go. Let's give our listeners some solutions which they love.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so first, I believe the first mistake I mentioned was kind of hiring for the wrong things and how do we focus more on culture, fit, and character. And I would say the first thing is you actually have to know what kind of culture your organization is embracing. Many small businesses maybe haven't taken the time to really think this through. And when I say culture, I mean, simply put, Michael, it's just what is your organization's personality? What is it like to work there? And this is all grounded in values. What do you value? And then how should we be behaving within this organization to support those values? So the norms of behavior that support those values. And to simplify this, one of my very favorite examples that I share with organizations when I'm helping them identify their core values is this story about Southwest Airlines. And it comes from one of Patrick Lencioni's books. But at Southwest Airlines, one of their core values is humor, having a sense of humor. And so when you think about their culture and you think about how this value informs what is it like to work here, and you think about, if you're listening, if you've ever flown on Southwest, you can already picture it, right? The joy that you are met with their employees, and then the humor that's woven in. I don't know how many flight attendants have made jokes during the safety briefing, right? But that's pretty normal. Well, there was an instance where a customer had sent a note to the CEO saying, hey, I wanted to let you know I was on a flight and one of the crew members made several jokes during the safety briefing and it made me uncomfortable. It made me question the safety of the flight and I thought you would want to know. And I think most of us, under pressure from an upset customer and certainly anything around safety within this industry, we would respond and say, I'm so sorry that happened. Thank you for letting me know. Rest assured this won't happen again. But alas, when you are aware of your company's culture, you're aware of what behaviors you want to celebrate and recognize within the organization, then you align to that. And for Southwest, because humor is one of their core values, this CEO actually celebrated that the crew member interjected humor in the briefing, and he responded to this complaint with 3 words: we'll miss you, right? So he was ready to let the customer go because he was honoring their culture and their values. And the reason I tell this story is because when we are hiring talent, are we crystal clear first on what behaviors we want to see out of our people? What behaviors we want to recognize and reward and celebrate around here, and what behaviors are not welcomed here? And once we're crystal clear on that, then we screen for them in the hiring process. We've got to be aware of them first to be able to then evaluate for them. And so I would say that's a first step, and then identifying and how will we screen for those things in the interview. And again, I think that's more important to screen for than even technical ability.
Well said, and great points that you've made. A person's business vision, their mission, their guiding principles and values not only are essential for many of the decisions that are made in your business, but one of the most important is the staff that you hire, and who will they map back to those that you've established. And unfortunately, many don't have those because they're not necessary. They're one of those important but not essential or urgent things that you need to get done. But you can see right now, without those and going into hiring staff, I mean, it could be a complete nightmare.
Yes, exactly. Right. When your employees are interacting with clients, you want them to represent your organization well. And so there needs to be clarity on, well, what is the expectation for how we behave with each other and with our clients? And that needs to be communicated and screened for in the hiring process. Yes, that was a great supporting point there. Plus here, the second mistake that I mentioned was a shallow hiring process, right? We don't actually spend enough time getting to know the candidate and ensuring that they are the right fit. And so a few ideas around this. One thing that we did to amplify our hiring process for a couple of our programs at Boeing was we added a few dimensions. We started first with a one-on-one phone interview. Then we had a panel interview where multiple people were sitting on a panel and we were asking structured questions. And then we also added a group simulation where we had a group of candidates participate in this group exercise so we could see how they worked with each other during that activity. And I recognize for a smaller business where maybe you're just hiring one person, you're not hiring 5 at a time, that would be a little bit trickier. But an alternative would be to bring that individual in for half a day or a full day to work with the team and allow them to come sit in a staff meeting or to go for a ride along to a client meeting and just allow them to experience it and see how they engage in those activities. So don't be afraid to incorporate them in to a longer hiring process and see how they show up over time. Another piece I would say is it's so important to know how they're interacting with more than just me, the hiring manager, right? Of course, they're going to be on their very best behavior with me as the hiring manager, but maybe you have an administrator assistant who helps book their travel or schedule their interview if they're local, and you want to know how they're engaging with that assistant as well. I've even heard of, I've never done this myself, Michael, but I've heard of companies purposely making an error. So maybe the assistant makes an error in the scheduling time or the location, and then you see how the candidate responds to that. Do they respond to it with patience and kindness, or do they get flustered and rude and respond in a way that we don't want? And so there can be some fun things that you add into there, but essentially the goal is see them in multiple contexts and take the time to really get to know them, because A, it's important for you to see them in many different situations, and B, it's actually really important for them to get quite a bit of time with you. They're trying you on for size as well, and you don't want to hire somebody who doesn't actually feel like they're a fit for you. So it enables both sides to try each other on for size. Make sense?
It makes total sense. And, I think taking the time here is good for business, right? We want to get things done quickly, but this is one area that we all have to go, wait a second, let's pump the brakes a bit here and just slow play it, because make the right decision, the best decision you possibly can, because of the implications. And you mentioned them, the great cost. And it's one of those things, again, that you don't realize until you're in that cost of having when you've made a mistake, right? It's not like you go and see the impact, right? You've got to train that person, bring them on. If they don't work out, all these cost potential things that can go wrong, it makes sense to go slow when really that's the last thing you probably want to do when you need help, right? Many people hire when they need help, but it's like, I just need someone to come and help rescue me from this challenge that I'm in, or start getting the work done, or whatever it might be. And that would be a mistake to make the decision quickly. So you've laid out some really solid things here to help them with that.
Yeah. To add to that too, if you are in a bind and need quick help, hire temporary help, hire an intern or a contractor, because then you're not permanently connected to it, and it enables you to really see them full-time in the job. And so we were a huge believer of interns at Boeing, which I realize, huge Fortune 50 company versus a small business. But hey, guess what? College students would love to have an internship at a small business as well. So don't forget about that opportunity. Let me also address kind of that third mistake, because sometimes I think this one isn't addressed as often, and I'm pretty passionate about it. And this is the influence of our own biases, often that we're not even aware of. And just so we're kind of aligned on what I mean by that, let's name a couple of these biases that can tend to influence our hiring decisions. First is affinity bias. And affinity bias means that we are drawn towards someone similar to us. So when you run into somebody who went to the same college as you all of a sudden feel this connection, or they look like you, or they have the same favorite football team as you, right? There's these similarities draw us in. And so in the interview process, when we find those similarities with some candidates over others, we're often drawn to them and tend to weight their qualifications higher than others, even if that's not the case. Another one is called the beauty bias, and it's just what you think. It's that we equate appearance to performance. Sadly so, this is what we do. And some statistics around it that are pretty fascinating. Employees earn, on average, $891 more per inch. So height is a huge piece of this. And in fact, in the U.S., it's about 2/3 of the U.S. CEOs are over 6 feet tall. So we equate height and appearance with performance. That's where a phone interview can be really helpful to kind of keep you from being influenced by that bias initially. And then one other one I would say is conformity bias. So if you actually are doing an interview with multiple people on your staff, which is great, I'm a huge advocate of that. The people with the most seniority, so you business leaders, have a heavier influence on the other ones in the room. So if you as the business owner have a junior staff member in the interview panel and you share your opinion on the candidate first, absolutely they're going to be influenced by that. And so finding a process to make sure everybody can really chime in with their feedback before being influenced by others. And so a couple things to be able to, I just highlighted more of the mistakes. Let's talk about how do we actually mitigate those biases. And a couple of things can happen or can be done to help you do that. First, I would say take the time to really articulate what you need in this role. What are what knowledge, skills, and abilities does the top candidate truly need to have, and do not inflate that. Post it as is and at the minimum, because when it comes to individuals applying to your jobs, women, for example, only apply to a job if they feel like they are over 90% qualified for the job, whereas men will apply if they feel roughly 50% qualified. So if you want to be able to equally consider both genders at hand, make sure you're not inflating the job requirements, because that's going to reduce the number of women applicants that you'll get already. So don't create unnecessary barriers. Another thing that can be done is to anonymize resumes. So in a small business, maybe you have an employee or an assistant who could actually take the resumes received and take their names off, take any university or college names off, because these things actually influence our perception of their qualifications. Mainstream first names get more invitations to interviews than others. So as much as you can anonymize the process, which again, I realize in a small business may feel daunting, but it's actually not that daunting if you have an assistant who can help with that. And then lastly, I would say create a really clear scoring criteria that aligns with the job requirements you have identified, so that you can keep yourself as aligned to those requirements as possible. It standardizes the process and make sure you are including more than just yourself in that hiring process as well. So just a few tips around that to minimize the bias that is inevitable for all of us. We all experience it. There's no finger pointing here. It's just awareness, and then what can I do about it?
Fantastic. There is so much to think about and do, but as we've talked about, when you do it and you get it right, it has big benefits and long-term implications for your business. Abbey, this has been fantastic. I'd love to give our listener a tip on where they can get more information from you, perhaps some resources or more information or content that you've produced that they could get access to. Where would be the best for them to go get that? Sure,
yes. So I currently don't have I have some great free resources available on my website right now, none specifically around hiring, so apologize for that, but some other good resources about creating a healthy work environment that absolutely you should check out, completely free. They can find more information on my website, which is www.mintify.co, and that's MINTIFY, and .co, not .com. And then also the women's leadership training that I talked about, which can be really helpful for the women listeners out there. If you're interested in being able to really ground yourself in your values and your vision for yourself, and then show up in a way that feels more comfortable and confident, nextlevelwomenleaders.com is the site for that. Other resources too, Michael, just around hiring, I would say Patrick Lencioni's book, The Ideal Team Player, is one of my favorites around what to look for when hiring, and it really just it simplifies it. So that's a great one to look at. and maybe even consider working with a local recruiter. Just as business owners hire you bookkeepers to help them, consider hiring an expert to help you as well. There are a couple of recruiters in town here that I constantly refer folks to, and it's a really valuable service too.
Fantastic. Well, this is great. Some great resources. Of course, we'll have those listed in our show notes. And Abbey, you're also, as we've already talked a little bit about, you're speaking again this year at QuickBooks Connect San Jose. Tell us a little bit about the event for you last year and why you think our listeners should go and attend.
Sure. That's a great question. Yes, last year, Michael, was my very first time attending, and I've been to a number of conferences over the years, and I was blown away. It's a beautiful event for one, with amazing food, but even more importantly than that, the content really is fabulous. And the way that it's designed to help people connect with each other, to connect with great resources and ideas, tangible, actionable steps to take from each session. I mean, it is very well done. And so I would absolutely recommend going, and I'm thrilled that I'm going back. And I would love to meet anybody there. So I'll be presenting on the second day. I believe that's November 7th, on the Thursday in the morning, and would love to have anybody come to that session. I'll be focused on how you create an environment, as I've talked about today, how you create an environment in your team that really drives the highest levels of performance and engagement, all based on the 5 primary domains of social well-being, which in simplified terms means what's most important to your employees and how do you help to honor that so that they can, again, bring their best work forward.
It's fantastic. And the theme of the conference this year is Own the Future. So if you're looking to own the future, this is the place to be. And it is a fantastic event. And Abbey, you summed it up just fantastically. So hopefully we'll get a chance to meet some of the listeners at QuickBooks Connect San Jose this year. And Abbey, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for generously giving us your knowledge today on the podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity, Michael. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to meeting you in person at QuickBooks Connect and hopefully attending your session as well.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to that, and it's good. We're going to have a heap of fun. That is absolutely
right.
For sure. So I'm looking forward to it, and we'll definitely want to have you back on the podcast as well in the future, because you've got so many things that I think our listener can learn from. And so thank you for doing this, and we hope to have you back at some point.
Well, thank you. I'd love to join you again. I appreciate it.
Excellent. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. As mentioned, to get more information about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.